Oh hi! If you are new to my channel, I am Taryn with Elegant Upgrades, and we are doing the $100 challenge. So last year was the first time I'd ever done a collaboration with other YouTubers, and it was the $100 challenge, so obviously I had to get in on this one. This one is put on by Sab from Sab's Rehabs. You can go check her out. I'll have the playlist linked below for all the other people who are doing this $100 challenge. It's been really interesting. So if you want to see how to get this look, which is mostly hidden, a lot of you don't like to see the finished product ahead of time, so I'm trying to moderately prevent that. And then at the end, I will have all the totals and go over everything there. So enjoy the video. Welcome to this week's piece. So I found this little guy on OfferUp. He was free. The person picked it up. They were initially going to refinish it and then said it was out of their realm. So I was like, ooh, lucky me. And I've got this challenge coming up, so it's the perfect pickup because, like I said, free. I typically pick up free pieces anyways because usually they're more challenging and a bit more fun. But it's especially great for this one since we don't want to spend, like, any money. The goal is to not spend any money. Of course we do, because it's just what happens. But so it came with the original pulls, which thankfully were metal. I picked up some of these and they've turned out to be like little acrylic handles, which are not fun. So to start this with, I'm obviously going to take off the rest of the veneer. I did include totals for this putty knife and also the heat gun. However, I didn't pay for these. I mean, they were already in my shop. I've used them a billion times. So it was technically a no expense thing for me, but I did include them in the total. Now there's numerous ways to remove veneer, but this was just, I felt the best one for the challenge, so it's the one that I used. A lot of the techniques that I'm going to use, I'm using similar to what I did when I very first started, because when you very first start you have $0. So that's kind of what I tried to do for the theme of the video. Now I am going to be using my orbital sander just to save me some time. However, please know that when I first started I did hand sand everything until I actually was given a sander from somebody who had an additional one. So that's always an option here. Alternatively, you can just scuff sand an entire piece if you don't want to bring the wood back and paint instead of bringing back the wood, which again will save you time on sanding. But I have fully sanded down to wood by hand before in the past. It is not fun. However, it gives you some really good muscles. So you saw me wet down the wood there. That lets me know where I still have some finish left to go over with the sander. And I just let it fully dry before I go back and get it fully sanded down to the bare wood. But that's what the wet misting does, is it cleans off the extra sanding dust and shows where you have some kind of sneaky finish. So I brought you along to the dollar store with me because I think it's really important to show the tools and stuff that you can use from here that are really inexpensive, many of which I still use now. So I still use screwdrivers that I've purchased from there in the past. I use all the cleaning products because they're good and they last forever and they're inexpensive to replace, obviously. Things that I don't use are like the stencils, some of the transfers that they have. The drawer liners, these are awesome. So I used those a ton when I first started. I don't use them so much anymore, but I definitely used them when I first started. Quite a few brushes I will still use. Not all of them. Some of them are a little too cheesy, but like the stenciling brushes and stuff are great. And then I wanted to show these paints because I feel like you can kind of use them in addition to other stuff. And so for the top stain on this, one of my very first stains I've ever done was ammonia and steel wool. I'm sorry, not ammonia. Don't use ammonia. Vinegar and steel wool. And if you just let that sit for a few days, you can create your own aged finish on wood. So it just does a chemical reaction on the wood and it works really well. You just put one of the little steel wool pieces inside a container with vinegar, and it will just do amazing things to wood, which we'll see soon. But that was that little bottle that I showed you with it in there. So I'm just going through and making sure that I get off the rest of that finish that you can see on the wood there, and then we'll process it afterwards. When I very first started out, I had no clamps, so I used quite a bit of painter's tape to do a lot of fixes, and then I would just set something heavy on top of things. So on this one drawer, the other two drawers did really well for me, but this one drawer had a couple spots where the actual wood lifted up, and so to repair that I just put wood glue down and then taped the pieces down. So that fixed that, and then I can go back over and sand it smooth. Now I don't need a perfectly smooth finish on these drawers because they're not staying wood, and I'm going to be painting something a little crazy over the top of it, so a little texture isn't going to hurt anything. Then I'll just make sure that the entire piece has a good scuff sand to it to let the paint adhere, and then I will give it a good cleaning. To clean it, I literally just use the vinegar that I used to create the steel wool wash. So that vinegar works really great for regular cleaning of pieces as well, and it's a huge container for like $1. It's actually $1.25 now, which I find amusing at the dollar store, but it is what it is. So to apply, all I do is use a rag. This was literally an old shirt that I cut up, so no money spent there. And you can just use any old container to put it in. Like I said, let it sit for a couple of days and put it on. And you won't notice anything initially. You do have to wait for it to kind of work with the wood, and the wood will kind of go through a process, and you'll watch it. And you can do multiple coats on this if you want it to get darker. So this just gives kind of that aged effect. And I kind of want this to be a driftwood style looking top. So that's the direction that I'm going with this. So this was the perfect wash for that. Now the drawers were missing some of the drawer stops, and others they had the little metal ones that are typically in there. I don't like those because they mess up the bottom of your drawer. What I do like are these are the little tabs that go on top of paint cans that you essentially just throw away. However, if you save them, they'll fit in the original grooves, or you can actually hammer them into the piece, and they work as drawer stops, but because they're rounded on the top, they don't damage the drawer bottoms. And they're just a tiny little lip to stop the drawer from going in too far. So this is a fun trick I learned early on. As I said, you can do multiple washes of this, so you can kind of see the wood slightly graying just a little bit, but the more you do, the grayer it will get. And it's interesting because it reacts differently with all different species of wood. So some you'll get a really cool quick reaction, and some take a little bit longer. So you just kind of have to play with what you have and see what happens. I'm going to give the entirety of this a coat of Pebble Beach. It was originally called light khaki, but it is just kind of that nice soft color. It's not quite white, but it's very mellow in that regard. So I'm going to use 2 of the Dollar Tree brushes that I picked up. Now, they're not my favorite, but they worked. The angled one especially was quite a bit better than the 3-inch one, but I would definitely use these for painting something later, but I wouldn't necessarily use them to get a smooth finish because they're not great. A great inexpensive brush is the Shortcut brush by Wooster. That was the brush I started out with using and I loved it, and I still buy that one all the time in the large packs, and I love that brush. But because I was trying to do this even less expensive than I did the first go round, I picked up these brushes. Now the top was a process, and while I liked this gray, it wasn't quite driftwoody enough, so it's going to go through a few more steps to get to where I want it to. So this is going to be a paint wash. I'm going with the direction because again, I want it to be that driftwood look, and driftwood still has striations. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep this, work in small sections, put it on, very watery. I have my spray bottle in hand if I need to, and then just wipe it back with a rag as I go. Now I'm on to the second coat of the Pebble Beach. When I do this with my little shortcut brush, I can get 2 coats out of this and it is just fine. I don't need any more than that, but I did go back and do a 3rd coat because using that brush wasn't the best. So this is the little shortcut brush I'm telling you about. It works way, way better, but again, you do what you can with what you have. So if you can just get the dollar store brushes, that's fine. You can make it work until you sell your first piece and then use that money and then buy, you know, a $6 brush instead of a $1 brush. I don't typically paint my hardware with the furniture paint. However, I'm painting these into the piece, so that's why they're getting a coat separately off the piece, just so that I don't have to try and paint the back behind it. It's just easier to do the first coat while they're off. And if we're being honest, when we get to this point, there's somebody that would buy this dresser just like this. You probably wouldn't get a ton of money for it, but it could be your very first dresser and it could get you someplace to be able to afford more things for next time. Now I'm going to seal this with wax. This is just a little 4-ounce wax pot. I get multiple pieces out of this. You use wax very sparingly and then you buff it off. For right now, I'm just sealing the top in so that if I get paint on it while I'm finishing up the body, I can just wipe it off. Okay, so for what I did with this piece is I keep these little acrylic paints in my shop just because sometimes you need just a bright, vivid color to kind of adjust something else. So I hardly ever use these, but sometimes you just need a couple drops to enhance the color or to create a different one. So they're great for if you get, because furniture paint can be very expensive, but if you have a base color that you can work with, you can add those little acrylic paints to it, assuming it's water-based, and you can create multiple colors for that. But for this, I thought it would be really fun to do a black and white theme, since one of my very first paintings I did was the shades of gray, and it was just black and white essentially. And so I was like, you know what, that's a really good thing because you're only using 2 colors. So here I used the khaki color that I was using, the Pebble Beach, and then I just mixed in black to my desired depth, and I got multiple shades out of this. So it was a really good way to do it, but my base is still the good quality furniture paint, and then I'm adding in the other colors to that base. So these tiny detail brushes, again, you can pick those up from the dollar store. They work just fine. There was nothing wrong with them. And as well as those little plastic spatulas as well. I'm still learning how to paint. This, I think, is only my 6th or 7th one so far, and only my 2nd Seascape. So I'm still really trying to hone in my skills on doing the Seascapes. They're just a little more difficult for me than the landscapes, but still really fun to play around with. And it was really interesting to do it in just the black and white paint. So my last piece, I did a decoupage, which I printed out an image on my computer and decoupaged it to the front of my dresser, and then painted that into the piece. And I find that if you were just a beginner and you want to do something cool like that, that is the easiest way to go. This was just something that I wanted to try because it was fun for me, and I could use less money because I was saving on the sheet of paper and the printing ink. Again, I was just trying to do this as inexpensive as possible. However, that was a really good option, and if you already have paper lying around and you already have a printer, you can absolutely do it that way. And I'll link that video below because I think it is also a really good source of what you can do on a limited budget. I do make sure that my inside drawer matches because I can't stand when you open up the drawer and it just is a crazy different color. So I get it as close to the colors around it as I possibly can, but it's never perfect, and that's okay because I'm not going to paint in exactly right, but I do get it, you know, moderately close.
once the top had dried, I decided that I didn't like where it was at thus far, so I buffed off all the wax and then went through with the chip brush, again, dollar store, and I just did a bunch of striations using a bunch of the different tones that I already had. So I was using the white and then also a few different shades of gray from the little palette that I had been mixing things on, just to get the look that I wanted for the end result. And then I went through and waxed the entire piece.
I'm back. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this. It was very, very simplistic just because I think the simpler you go, obviously the less money you can spend, which is kind of what the goal is here. So my last year's video, I will link that below for you so you can see. I do recommend doing the decoupage papers because it's much easier, especially if you're just starting out, to blend in a paper that's already done and finished than it is to paint a scene. And I'm just kind of learning how to paint right now, so this is just me trying to do something for the challenge. It could definitely be better, but it could also be worse, so I think that's pretty great too. Okay, so if you're a beginner, obviously, I think I showed you in the video what it would look like if it was just painted white. That is obviously an option. Not an option that brings me joy, but it is one that could work, and lots of people love white furniture in their house because it matches everything. So that's a great place to start. My total on this for what I actually personally spent, and I didn't even have to spend this much, was $16.25. And I only spent that because I bought some extra things just to use them for the challenge, just to see if it could be done with kind of subpar tools. So $16.25 is the total that I spent on this piece completely. This piece was free, so that helped a lot. I'll have this up somewhere. So the total of what it would have been worth had I purchased everything brand new would have been $80.54. So for $80.54, I could get this. Mind you, I had an orbital sander, which isn't included, but I included sandpaper and something that you could do, like the little sanding block that comes with it. You can get that at the dollar store. You can get most anything at the dollar store. You just know that, I'm not gonna say all the products aren't great, but some of them, like, I wouldn't buy a dollar store stencil because they're usually kind of cheesy-ish, like little kid style stencils. But stencils I love because you can use them a billion times and wash them and reuse them, and it's brilliant. I love stencils. So those are a really good investment for somebody who's just starting out. And then, like, the heat gun, I already had. I didn't need to purchase that, but I included it in the total, and the heat gun was $16.99, so that took up quite a bit of my budget right there. The heat gun, the paint, which again, I included the entire total of the paint, which was almost $20. I didn't use all of it. You can use that size paint for multiple projects. So it's kind of just, I'm including all the totals of everything if I were to buy it new. But again, I spent $16.25 on this, but I didn't actually have to spend the $16.25 because I bought extra brushes, which I didn't need, but I wanted to use them so that you could see how the dollar store brushes worked. The wood glue, the painter's tape, additional colors. I already had those, but I showed you that you could buy those at the dollar store too, but I actually included the price of what I would have taken out of. So yeah, everything's on here. For if you were just starting out, barely, don't have anything, $80.54 for this piece. Now, you would get to reuse all of that stuff. I don't think there's a single thing on there that, maybe the sandpaper, you couldn't, but everything else, literally everything else you can reuse. Oh, I guess in the dresser, but that was free, so never mind. So I hope this was helpful. I hope it's inspiring. When I did my very first piece ever, the first time I ever did a dresser, I did a white dresser because it's what you do when you first start out. I used old paint that somebody had given me, an old brush, and wax. I hadn't used a top coat until I started really getting into things. I started out using wax, and it's a little bit more labor intensive. However, it is great for white paint because it doesn't reactivate it and add bleed through. So wax is really good on that account. But so I got multiple projects done out of the white paint that was given to me, paint brushes that were given to me, wax that was given to me, and the dresser I got for free. And then I sold it for $80, which is low. But with that first dresser, it helped me buy everything else. So, I mean, scour the marketplaces and everything, and you can find almost anything free. I know they have tool sets and all kinds of stuff for free or for close to free. You just have to be vigilant and keep looking until one pops up, because they're not always on there all the time, but if you're vigilant, you can find something, and it's just super cool when you can. Wow, I feel like I'm rambling now. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you're new to my channel, welcome, thanks, glad you watched this. You can check out my other stuff if you like, and if not, thanks for stopping by anyways. Thank you so much to my OG subscribers. You guys are just amazing. You know I love you so much, and you guys are just the most incredible humans ever, and I'll see you next week.